Yes, welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. Every week, having a conversation with an acclaimed business communication expert. And our conversations, as you listen to them, whether you're watching on video or hearing the podcast, our conversations will help you with your sales, your management, your teamwork, your productivity, and yes, your profits. So we're happy to have you with us today, and we're happy to have our guest. Now, let me introduce our guest, Rich Bartolotta. Rich is an insightful, results-oriented, truly global business leader. His background includes extensive international experience, as well as senior financial roles. Rich is currently a strategic partner with Schooley Mitchell, the largest independent telecom and merchant services expense reduction consultancy in North America. Rich began his professional career with IBM Corporation, working at several U.S. locations and in Tokyo. While in Japan, he spent time with NASDAQ, EDS, and IMS Health, 8 total years in Japan. As I said, truly international leadership. All told, he has 33 years in business executive leadership positions. So join me in welcoming Rich Bartolotta. How do you do, Rich?
Hey, Bill. Good morning. I'm doing well. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning.
Great to be with you. And I could add, if anybody really wants to know the real Rich Bartolotta, talk New York Giants and football season or talk golf year round, correct?
Yes, sir.
Rich, you and I talked before on the Biz Communication Show, and at that time we were talking about sales. Today we're going to talk about management because you had management positions in a number of different opportunities and locations and industries. So you can speak very well on that topic. We're going to talk about the difficult conversations that managers sometimes have to have. Now, having spent 20 years in management myself before I became a consultant, I think of some of the, I guess, uncomfortable conversations we'd have where we have to tell an employee perhaps that their personal hygiene is not too good, or maybe they dress inappropriately for the office, or possibly their jokes are a little bit off color. We could call those uncomfortable conversations, but there's some that are really very challenging. And that's what you and I will talk about today. To start with, and this happens very commonly today, of course, to start with, let's talk about what a manager says to his people when the corporation must go through a downsizing. This is a difficult time for everybody. It's a distressing time for management. It's a distressing time for employees. You may have been through that. How do you handle that?
No, Bill, I mean, it's a lot of tough topics that you highlighted. And I think nowadays things are just getting even more challenging for managers. I think in a downsizing, one of the things I always felt is you've got to be prepared. You've got to have some good notes before you go into the discussion on the key points you want to cover. You don't want to just go in and sort of wing it. The first thing I would want to do is make sure you explain why the downsizing or the action is being taken. Maybe it's a merger. Maybe competition is really impacting the business. Maybe the business is in financial distress and you just can't afford to keep the number of people or departments that you've got, right? There are a lot of different reasons. I think the other thing to keep in mind, it's really not, with very few exceptions, the person you're talking about in the downsizing, it's not their fault that they're being let go. And I think you want to be respectful of the person and really try to empathize with them. They probably got a family at home, kids, they're going to have to go home and tell them that they've been let go. So try to put yourself in their position and help paint the picture for them, right? Why is the action happening? Why am I impacted? What communicate what your company is going to do for the employees. Maybe you're going to give them some financial severance. Maybe you're going to give them, outplacement services. So it's important to do that. Be prepared and get to the point. I mean, I'll give you a real example. One downsizing I did, I had a few employees that were affected, and I had meetings scheduled with each one individually. And one woman came in, and I couldn't even start the conversation before she said, "Just tell me, am I fired?" And the answer is, yes, we're going to have to let you go. And so you can go in with, all the notes and the approach that you want to go, but you have to be ready to react. Sometimes people get emotional. This woman just wanted to know what she knew in her heart was about to happen, get to the point. She wanted to move on. Other people might argue with you. Other people are going to get emotional. You've got to be prepared and then be able to react to each situation. And I think if you treat people with respect and you're as transparent as you can be, you'll be successful in that conversation.
I like several things you said there. One particularly to start with, you must prepare for this truly difficult situation. You cannot go in there and wing it. And you really need to look prepared too. People want to know that you've given this careful thought and deliberation. It's not something you decided at breakfast this morning. This has been in the making for a long time. I like too, you're saying that you need to give an explanation. Why has this happened? And the good thing is, I see you pointing out, is that you keep the person's own situation in mind. You recognize that and you let them know that you understand how it is impacting them, their family, their finances, their future. And then another thing that I like so much is where you talk about how the company is going to help them through this transition, give them appropriate recommendations, give them outplacement counseling, give them a decent amount of severance so that they can have some sustenance until they look for another job. I remember so well, you and I were having lunch with our friend Alex Gregory of YKK. Alex had a 35-year career with YKK. And as you know, he had international experience. And there was one time early in his career when the company, as you say, they had a reason they had to downsize, and that was that their product was not doing enough for them. And so they had to enlarge their scope as far as their product. He explained that. And he also said how it was affecting management. As I recall, he said, I'm taking a salary cut myself. Everybody has to. So management being included, being concerned, having a plan, giving people help, all that is a vital part of it. To me, you've really nailed it well there, Rich.
Oh, thanks, Bill. I appreciate that.
And then I think on the opposite side of that, or maybe close to it, because there we were talking of groups, now we're talking about individuals. And that would be the traditional performance appraisal, which maybe a lot of managers don't look forward to, and many employees don't look forward to. What's your advice from your experience
Yeah,
on that?
it's another can be a great conversation to have with people if you do it right. It can be a tough one if you do it poorly. I've done it both ways. I think one of the keys is hopefully having discussions with the employee long before the formal evaluation meeting. So during the year. So if you're on an annual performance cycle, I probably want to have 3 meetings with you before we have a formal one, right? And during the year, I want to meet with you. So there's no real surprises at the time we do the formal evaluation.
That's exactly the word I was going to use. There are no surprises, there are no shocks. And this way, the person does not get to say to you, well, gosh, Rich, I didn't know anything was wrong. I didn't know I was behind. I didn't know I was failing on something. Why didn't you tell me? You prevent that by having these periodic checkup meetings, don't you?
You do, and I think the other thing, Bill, is clarity, right? A person wants to know where the bar is going to be set, right? What's par on that hole, right? Using a golf terminology.
I got you.
You want to know what you're going to be measured on. And then, so that has to be clear, right? And well understood. So when you're then meeting, you and I are meeting during the year, I'm giving you feedback specifically against the metrics or whatever we've agreed to, we're going to use to define your performance. And hopefully I'm giving you a lot of positive feedback, right? Things you're doing really well and continue to do well. And I'm going to give you any areas to improve, right? Because if I don't, I'm not doing you any favors. And if I tell you that at the back end of it, then it's going to be a real problem. So you got to give the person an opportunity to address the areas that they need to improve, and giving them clarity, giving them positive feedback, giving them the areas to improve, and telling them long before the formal appraisal process meeting is really, in my mind, the key to success.
I'm going to use a football analogy here, which you and I both will understand, and many of our listeners and viewers will. Can you imagine a coach in a championship game not telling his players anything until the last 2 minutes of the game?
Yeah, that's absolutely true, right? We all, and look, people appreciate that, and that's why I think I said to start this, section, that this can be the formal appraisal period can be a really positive meeting or a real negative one, right? And if you do it right, it should be positive, because you and I should be just talking about everything we've talked about multiple times before we get together, and no surprises, and you're happy that you've done a great job, and I'm happy to recognize that.
I'm pleased to hear you talk about compliments. I remember so well one of my first years in management, I was talking to somebody who was a veteran manager. He gave me some advice that I was glad I didn't follow. Many of us early in our careers, we want to hear from people who have succeeded, at least in our vision, they have succeeded. So I was talking with this man who had had about 15 years of management experience. And he said, Bill, I'm going to give you a tip that's very valuable. Don't ever compliment your people. He said, if you compliment your people, they're going to get lazy, they're going to get lackadaisical, they're going to think they've already got it made, and just don't do that. Well, I looked back, fortunately, to my father's example. My father managed a department store, family department store, for many years with about 60 employees, and he was very keen at complimenting his employees, never without good backing. There had to be a reason to compliment them, but he spotted reasons, as we always can. And he gave me a wonderful example there that people love to have their work commended. They like to be reinforced. They like to be supported. And you probably have heard, I think it's our friend Gail Ely, who talks about the sandwich approach when you're going to talk to an employee about something that's uncomfortable. You give them a compliment to begin with, and then in the middle of the sandwich, you might have to bring up something that they must work on. And then at the end of it, you give them a compliment possibly on something else. So I'm really happy that you talked about compliments being part of what a manager does throughout the year. Otherwise, a person's going to get discouraged and demoralized.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I agree with the example you used with Gail. That is the way to do it. And think about it, like you talked about your dad's business. What kind of culture are you creating if you compliment your employees in a real way, right? Not with false compliments, but real, genuine compliments. Aren't they going to be more likely to extend that courtesy and those compliments to customers and clients when they come through the door of the business? I think so. So I think it's part of creating a culture that you want for your business, and that culture starts with your employees, and they're going to become the best representation of the business to clients. So it's good business to do it that way.
Long ago, I heard that managers use either the carrot or the stick. And you picture that horse who's going out there and going after the carrot, the very nice reward, or you give them the stick. What's that old
Yeah.
saying, the quip that I've seen a few times? The beatings here will continue until morale improves.
Yeah.
That's not the way it works, is it?
No, no,
Time
not.
for one more question. You talked about a phrase that needs a little bit of definition. You said that sometimes we need to discuss with our employees economic value add. What is that, and how do you relate that and uh,
Yeah, I
define
was
that?
just really, I guess I use that as an example of, a lot of times we were talking about performances and bonuses. A lot of companies have different financial metrics that they want to use to measure the performance of the business, and to oftentimes use to fund bonus pools, right? We got to hit these numbers in order to be able to pay bonuses at the end of the year. And economic value add is the definition, if I'll just kind of read it to you real quick: net operating profit after taxes minus invested capital times weighted average cost of capital. I don't know many employees are going to understand what I just said,
Yeah,
right?
you missed me on that one.
Exactly. So, the better way to do it is just think in terms of a simple way to explain whatever you're trying to explain financially to the employee. In the case, let's take an example, Bill. If you and I want to go start a business, we're going to go to a bank, let's say, we're going to borrow a bunch of money, start a business up. We need that capital to invest in the business. And let's just say that's going to cost us $40,000 a year in interest expense. If we only generate $20,000 in profit at the end of the year, we're not creating economic value add. We're actually destroying value, right? Because our borrowing costs far exceed our profit. So I think whatever metrics you pick, you want to use ones that are relatively simple for people to understand. And then what you really want to do is help them understand what they can do to influence the company's performance, right? If you're managing a department, what can our department do to reduce cost? What can our department do to increase throughput, provide better client satisfaction, reduce inventory, reduce waste or write-offs of products? Try to pick metrics that people can understand and relate to. Keep it simple, and then give them clarity in what they can do and what actions they can take that will influence the profitability of the company. And don't get caught up in fancy stuff like economic value add and a bunch of other things that, unless you've got an MBA in finance, most people have no idea what you're talking about.
I think too, Rich, one thing you said there that to me has, using the word value, is asking the employees themselves to help you find those solutions and ways to cut costs or ways to improve productivity. Don't just come in with a list of how to do it, but get their input. That's very valuable.
They're the ones that know best the way to do that, right? And you're absolutely right. Having discussions with them and getting people to feel like they can put ideas on the table. Some will be good, some might not be good, but I think, creating a culture where people feel like they've got an owner's mentality to the business and they want to see the business improve and become more profitable and more successful and more competitive, is a great thing.
Rich, it's easy to see why your management career, along with your sales career, why those were so stellar. And we're very grateful that you've shared these insights with us. I know there are those who want to get in touch with you as a result of this conversation. So please share with us now your contact information.
Yeah, I think, Bill, the easiest way is just to give me a call in the office. My number is 678-436-5740.
Thanks. And I know that we'll want to follow up on that. And since you've given your contact information, I'll share mine. Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. So logically, my website is bizcommunicationguy.com. Invite you to go there, check my services for corporations and leaders, sign up for my newsletter, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and give me a call so that we can talk about your communication challenges and how I can help you with them. Communication business expert, Rich Bartolotta, it's great to have you with us. Any closing comments about management and communication, the topic we've covered today?
I think, Bill, in closing, I mean, to me, the key things of everything we've really talked about, it's have respect for the employees, be as transparent as you can. I think avoid humor or casual conversational tone in these difficult discussions, and be focused, right? Don't allow yourself to be distracted with phone calls in these conversations, or your secretary coming in and telling you something is urgent. You really want to be respectful of the people, and then just be able to react to the way the conversation goes, because difficult discussions, everybody reacts differently to, and you go in with your sort of game plan on how you want the conversation to go, but sometimes it goes a little differently, and I just come back to transparency and being respectful, and I think you'll get through all these tough conversations in a very positive, professional way.
Excellent summary there. Before I close, I do want to comment on what you said about being careful with humor in a situation like that. I remember so well, though I guess I've tried to forget, an uncomfortable situation I had with my supervisor one time where we disagreed on procedures. And I thought mine was very reasonable. He, in a very overbearing way, thought mine was unreasonable. So he sent me a memo, a written memo, shortly after our conversation, and it said at the bottom, and he was trying to be upbeat and humorous, "Be reasonable, Bill, do it my way." Well, that did not come across as a joke to me at all. So be very, very careful with humor. It has its place in management and in business. It can have many advantages, but this is not the time for it. Rich Bartolotta, thanks so much for being our guest, and we thank all of you who joined us. We invite you to be with us again next week for another edition of the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy.